So over the past few weeks, I have accumulated some new books and I wanted to make a video on my channel talking about the books that I've been purchasing. So I decided to split this up into a few different videos, so this is part one of my book haul. The first book that I want to talk about is The 100 Years' War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonialism and Resistance from 1917 to 2017. And this book is by Rashid Khalidi, who is the author of Palestinian Identity. At the beginning of this year, a number of channels that I followed all talked about the fact that they were going to be reading this book. So I placed a hold on the audiobook from my local library. It took about 3 months for the audiobook to be available from my local library, and by the time it became available, I was a little bit busy with things going on in my personal life and wasn't really able to focus and give the audiobook justice. But I did listen to the entire audiobook back in April of this year, and overall I really enjoyed the book. The one thing I felt is it wasn't a book to read quickly. It was something you need to read very slowly and take in all of the information that Khalidi is sharing. I'll just say that this book is extremely expansive in scope. I'm very impressed by Khalidi's ability to get all of this history in a relatively small book. It felt to me like it was very well researched. It also was very easy to read. Khalidi weaves in history and also personal stories of himself and his family. So it makes it a very accessible book. I find some history books are a little bit dry. I definitely did not have that issue with this one. It was a very engaging and interesting read. So as I mentioned, I wasn't really in the right mind state to read this book earlier this year. So I wanted to reread this book with the physical copy and really take my time reading it very slowly. The book details key events in history such as the 1917 Balfour Declaration, the destruction of Palestine in 1948, Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982, and the endless and futile peace processes. With everything that's going on in the Middle East, specifically the rising tensions between Lebanon and Israel, I wanted to reread this book because I know history has a knack of repeating itself, and understand more about what led to the war between Israel and Lebanon back in the 80s, to hopefully understand or have an idea of what possibly will be happening in the future between those two countries. The second book that I recently purchased is The State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin. So for this book, I plan to make videos about the chapters in this book that really stand out to me. It may end up being every single chapter, I'm not sure. The first chapter looks at the Marxist theory of the state, specifically the way in which the state as an institution is used by those in power as a way to exploit those who are oppressed. And then later on in the chapter, Lenin talks about Marxist theory about what happens to the state after the revolution of the proletariat. That's what I like about this book. It's very practical, taking Marxist theory and seeing how it actually would apply to countries that have revolutions and what happens to something such as the state after the revolution of the working class people. So I plan to do a video on that. I'm hoping it'll be up within a week of this one being up, and that's just on the first chapter. That's what I mean. This book is just so rich. It's so short and small, but there's so much knowledge within it. So the next book I have here is Black Skin, White Masks by Frantz Fanon. All of his books are really interesting because he tackles the impact and repercussions of colonization from a psychiatrist's perspective, which I find absolutely fascinating. So I read this book, I read it back in July, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it, I believe, 4.5 stars. A really interesting look at the impact of colonization on the Black psyche. In this book, Fanon also looks at the impact of interracial relationships on Black women and Black men, and I don't necessarily agree with his conclusions, but still was interesting to read. So then now I'm getting into the books that I have not read before, and Continuing on with Fanon, I have The Wretched of the Earth. Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth is a masterful and timeless interrogation of race, colonialism, psychological trauma, and revolutionary struggle, and a continuing influence on movements from Black Lives Matter to decolonization. A landmark text for revolutionaries and activists, The Wretched of the Earth is an eternal touchstone for civil rights, anti-colonialism, psychiatric studies, and Black consciousness movements around the world. Initially, I was planning to not read this book for a while, but I found a really interesting book study in Toronto that I think I want to join, and they are reading this book for the month of August, so looks like this will now be one of the books that I plan to read this month. The next book I recently added to my collection is The Laws by Plato. I do believe I spoke about this book in my video, the 24 books that I want to read in 2024. And I had initially tried reading an older edition of this book because this is a new translation. And I did struggle with that a little bit, so I figured I needed to get my hands on this classics edition in order to really do it justice. In The Laws, Plato describes in fascinating detail a comprehensive system of legislation in a small agricultural utopia he named Magnesia. His laws not only govern crime and punishment, but also form a code of conduct for all aspects of life in his ideal state, from education, sport, and religion to sexual behavior, marriage, and drinking parties. Plato sets out a plan for the day-to-day rule of Magnesia, administered by citizens and elected officials, with supreme power held by a council. Although Plato's views that citizens should act in complete obedience to the law have been read as totalitarian, The Laws nonetheless constitutes a highly impressive program for the reform of society and provides a crucial insight into the mind of one of classical Greece's foremost thinkers. And so this is a new translation by Trevor J. Saunders. So for people who are new to my channel or have not come across my channel before, I am a lawyer and I currently work as a lawyer, but I plan to go back to school to become a law school professor. So I'm really interested in jurisprudence or legal theory, understanding the reasons why we have laws and the purpose of laws. So it felt fitting to read this work of jurisprudence by Plato, understanding his reasons as to why all of these different laws in this utopian society are required, what the laws look like, and that sort of thing. And while it's interesting to look into jurisprudence and understanding the philosophy of law, I think it's also important to recognize the disparity between the legal theory, the reasons why we have laws, and then what actually happens in reality. So I am looking for a book probably from a Marxist perspective. I have found one, but it seems a little bit challenging to read. But Marxist critiques of laws, because I think it's very easy from a philosophical perspective to say laws are here for this reason, but what actually ends up happening is that laws are used as tools by the powerful to oppress the marginalized. Somewhat of a tangent. This is Plato's The Laws. And the final book I'm going to talk about in part 1 of this video is Paradise Lost by John Milton. I actually don't remember how I first came across this book. I don't remember at all. I don't think the back of this book really does it justice, so I have a little bit of a description of it here. This epic poem tells a story of the fall of man, in which God and Satan battle for control of mankind's destiny. The book spans 3 worlds, heaven, hell, and earth, as Satan and his band of rebel angels plot their revenge against God. At the center of the conflict are Adam and Eve, who are motivated by human temptations, but whose ultimate downfall is unyielding love. I found Milton a very interesting person, and I have been interested in epic poetry for a while. I initially read the Iliad by Homer, which I enjoyed. I thought it was a very interesting journey. I also last year read The Inferno by Dante, which I really enjoyed. And so now I've been wanting to get more into epic poetry, which I think also as a genre is just so underrated. After reading Homer and then reading Dante, I really much preferred The Inferno because there's just something I find interesting about books that deal with religious themes or ideas. And I grew up going to church. Because of that, I'm the most familiar with Christianity. So I decided that while exploring epic poetry, it probably made the most sense to start with epic poems written by Christian authors. Later this year, I plan to read epic poems that are written by Islamic authors. But anyway, I wanted to start with this one. I've read a little bit of it so far. I think I'm on book 3. Milton is not an easy person to read, but so far I have not been loving it, but I have been challenged, I will say that much. I did enjoy the second book though. The first book was a little bit challenging to get through. And it's funny because Milton wrote this as a Christian, but I know a lot of people have read this and they've said they found Satan's character to be the most interesting, which I'm sure was not Milton's point. So I also am curious to see and understand more of Satan's monologues. But yeah, I'm working through this very slowly but surely. Hopefully I can finish it by September. That's the goal I've given myself, so that I can pick up the epic poem by an Islamic author, which I believe it's called Conference of the Birds, is what I plan to read. And I'm hoping if I give myself 3 months for that, that's enough time. So thank you for watching part 1 of my haul video. I have about 10 or so additional books that I have to chat about, but I just wanted to break it up into smaller videos. Makes editing much easier for me rather than having to edit like a 1 hour long video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to my channel, this channel is all about re-education and decolonizing the mind. I decided to go on a journey of reading and learning new things, and I made this channel as a way that I could share what I am reading and learning with the world. If you're interested in following along with me on this journey, feel free to subscribe. I also have started an Instagram page, and on there I plan to post quotes and post books that I'm reading. I'm not always going to be able to post on YouTube all the time, so I figured that would be a way for me to be able to share the books that I'm reading, especially times when I'm not able to make a video. I also have a Goodreads account, which I will include in the description box if you're interested in just seeing the books that I'm reading on there. So thank you so much for watching. I continue to appreciate all of the love and support I've gotten on my channel so far, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.